Advice feels safe, it's neat, predictable, and comforting. When someone gives us advice, it gives us a sense of direction, a feeling that we are doing something, even if we haven't moved an inch. We write it down, highlight it, and nod our heads as if something profound just happened. But deep inside, we know the truth advice changes nothing until we decide to act. We've all heard powerful words before, and yet the hardest step is still the first one we refuse to take. There's a strange comfort in collecting advice. It allows us to feel prepared without facing the risk of actually doing something. It's like standing on the edge of a diving board, listening to people shout, "Jump!" from below, and convincing ourselves that understanding the physics of diving is the same as diving itself. But knowledge, no matter how deep, cannot replace motion. It's not the words that move us forward, it's the courage to trust ourselves enough to take the leap. Action, unlike advice, is raw and unpredictable. It doesn't come with guarantees, only possibilities. When you act, you expose yourself to failure, rejection, and embarrassment. And yet, in that exposure lies your greatest strength, because every stumble, every mistake, every uncomfortable moment becomes a lesson you could never have learned through someone else's wisdom. Action demands vulnerability, but it also builds resilience, confidence, and authenticity. The truth is, advice is often a mirror, reflecting what we already know but haven't admitted. We seek advice not because we don't know the answer, but because we hope someone will give us permission to act on it. We want validation that it's okay to take risks, to make changes, to try something new. But waiting for permission means giving someone else power over your potential. No one else can walk your path, so no one else's advice can truly define your journey. We live in a time when advice is everywhere. Podcasts, videos, motivational quotes, endless streams of people telling us what to do and how to do it. The irony is that the more advice we consume, the less action we take. We confuse inspiration with progress. We chase motivation instead of momentum. We listen to voices that tell us how to live instead of trusting our own to guide us forward. Action, on the other hand, is brutally honest. It doesn't care about your plans or your fears. It demands presence, persistence, and patience. You can't talk your way into success. You have to show up for it again and again. Every small step, even when it feels insignificant, carries more power than 100 perfectly crafted plans that never leave the page. Taking action doesn't mean ignoring advice altogether. It means using it as fuel, not as a map. Advice should inspire thought, not dictate movement. The best lessons come after you've tried, failed, and tried again. You'll find that what once seemed complicated becomes simple once you've lived through it. The clarity you seek won't come from others, it will come from the experience of doing. It's easy to look at successful people and think they must have received the right advice. But what truly separates them is not the advice they followed, it's the action they took when no one else was watching. They didn't wait to feel ready. They didn't wait for certainty. They acted, learned, adjusted, and kept moving. They understood that growth is not a product of perfect plans, but of imperfect steps taken with conviction. When you take action, you begin to see how much of what you feared was an illusion. The what-ifs lose their power the moment you start moving. Progress replaces doubt. Results replace excuses. You begin to realize that everything you've been searching for was never hidden in someone else's advice. It was waiting inside you, dormant, ready to be awakened by motion. So while advice can open your eyes, only action will open your life. Words can point the way, but only your steps can carry you there. Every breakthrough, every transformation, every story worth telling began not with advice, but with the decision to act, to try, to do, to move. Because in the end, what defines you isn't what you've been told, it's what you've done. Courage is the invisible force that separates dreamers from doers. It's not loud or dramatic. Often, it's quiet and trembling. It's the whisper that says, go anyway. When everything in you screams to stay still. Most people don't lack knowledge or talent. They lack courage. They have all the information they need, all the advice in the world. Yet they freeze when it's time to take the next step. Courage isn't about eliminating fear. It's about choosing movement despite it. It's the willingness to act when your hands shake and your heart doubts you. We live in a society that glorifies comfort. We want guarantees before we begin, applause before we perform, certainty before we commit. But courage doesn't work that way. It thrives in uncertainty. It grows in the dark, in the space between fear and faith. Every meaningful achievement in history was born from someone who decided to move forward when it was easier to stay safe. Comfort may protect you from failure, but it also robs you of discovery. You cannot find your purpose inside the walls of what's familiar. When you seek courage, you will often find discomfort waiting for you. That's the test. Courage demands that you trade your comfort for growth, your hesitation for risk, your excuses for effort. It's not about being fearless. It's about being honest. When you admit that you're scared but move anyway, you reclaim your power. Fear stops controlling you the moment you acknowledge it without surrendering to it. Courage doesn't silence fear, it simply speaks louder. Too many people wait for confidence before they act, not realizing that confidence is the reward of courage, not its prerequisite. The more you act, the stronger your courage becomes. Every small victory, every moment you survive what you thought you couldn't, adds another layer of strength. And eventually, you look back and realize that what once terrified you has become your foundation. You are no longer avoiding fear. You are fueled by the knowledge that you can face it and keep going. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to wake up and try again. It's sending that message, taking that leap, saying yes when your mind is listing all the reasons to say no. Courage shows up in the moments when no one is watching, when you're questioning your worth but still pushing forward. It's not dramatic or perfect. It's raw, messy, and human. But that's what makes it powerful, because real courage doesn't seek recognition. It seeks truth. When you choose courage over comfort, you become unstoppable. The obstacles don't disappear, but your relationship with them changes. Instead of seeing them as walls, you see them as steps. Instead of feeling defeated by failure, you recognize it as part of your evolution. Every challenge becomes a teacher, and every setback becomes a story of persistence. You stop fearing life's uncertainty because you realize that uncertainty is where all possibilities live. People often believe courage is something you either have or don't, but it's more like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Every time you say yes to something that scares you, you strengthen your ability to act in the face of fear. Courage grows through repetition. It's built in moments that seem small, a difficult conversation, a bold decision, a vulnerable confession, but those moments compound into a life defined by bravery instead of regret. It's easy to look at courageous people and think they are special, but they're not. They simply learn to stop negotiating with fear. They feel it, acknowledge it, and act anyway. They understand that courage isn't about removing fear. It's about mastering it. What makes them different is their willingness to face the unknown with open eyes. They move not because they are certain of success, but because they refuse to let fear dictate their story. Courage will always feel uncomfortable because it asks you to leave behind what is safe. But everything you want, growth, freedom, impact, fulfillment, lives beyond that discomfort. The comfort zone may feel secure, but it is also where dreams quietly die. To live fully, you must be willing to step into the discomfort that comes with trying, failing, and learning. The pain of courage is temporary. The regret of inaction lasts a lifetime. The world doesn't need more people waiting to feel ready. It needs people willing to act while they're afraid. It needs those who are willing to take risks, to be imperfect, to move with trembling hands and uncertain steps. Because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward in spite of it. And when you choose courage, you don't just change your circumstances, you change who you are becoming with every brave step you take. Knowledge is a powerful thing, but without action, it becomes weightless. It sits in our minds collecting dust, waiting for the perfect moment that never comes. We read books, attend seminars, watch videos, and fill our notebooks with insights that feel profound in the moment. But without application, they fade into background noise. Knowledge without action is like potential energy that never moves. It has promise, but no impact. It gives the illusion of progress while keeping us safely removed from risk. There's comfort in knowing. When we gather information, we feel productive. It feels like we're getting closer to our goals, even when we haven't taken a single tangible step. We convince ourselves that if we just learn one more thing, prepare a little longer, or find the right strategy, then we'll finally be ready to act. But that readiness never arrives. The more we know, the easier it becomes to hide behind what we know. Action, on the other hand, strips away that safety. It exposes us to the possibility of being wrong, And that's what most people are trying to avoid. True understanding doesn't live in your head, it lives in your hands. You can study how to play the piano for years, but until your fingers touch the keys, you will never truly understand the music. You can memorize everything about leadership, but until you make a tough decision, you won't understand what leadership feels like. Experience breathes life into knowledge. It gives context, texture, and weight to the things we've learned. Without experience, knowledge is flat. It exists only in theory, disconnected from reality. Action transforms what we think we know into something we can actually use. It refines our understanding. It turns abstract ideas into practical wisdom. When you act, you see where your knowledge holds up and where it falls short. You learn what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, how to adapt. Knowledge alone can't teach you resilience, creativity, or intuition. Those things come only through doing, failing, and doing again. Each action deepens your insight far more than passive learning ever could. Failure, too, is a kind of teacher that no book can replicate. It shows you the gap between theory and reality. It humbles you and sharpens you. The lessons that come from mistakes have a kind of permanence that advice rarely has. When you fail, the pain etches the truth into your memory. You don't just remember the concept, you feel it. And that feeling becomes the foundation of real growth. That's why people who act, even imperfectly, progress faster than those who wait for perfect understanding. We often celebrate intelligence, but intelligence without execution is potential wasted. The world doesn't reward those who merely know, it rewards those who do. The innovators, creators, and leaders who shape history are not the ones with the most information. They are the ones who dared to apply what they knew in the face of uncertainty. They learned through action, adjusted through experience, and evolved through persistence. Their success wasn't built on what they memorized, it was built on what they practiced. Action is the bridge between what you learn and what you become. It takes the intangible and makes it real. It turns ideas into impact. When you act, you're not just applying knowledge, you're reshaping it. You begin to see how things work in the real world, beyond the neatness of theory. You develop instincts that can't be taught, only earned. And with every step you take, knowledge becomes wisdom, and wisdom becomes power. We've been taught to value preparation over participation, but participation is where all transformation happens. You can't think your way into mastery, you have to live your way into it. Every expert was once a beginner who took action before they felt ready. They didn't know everything. They learned by doing. They discovered that mistakes are not the opposite of success, but part of it. Every misstep gave them insight that no amount of study could have provided. It's easy to mistake learning for progress because learning feels safe. It's structured, predictable, and within our control. But action is unpredictable, and that's what makes it so powerful. When you act, you enter a space where you can no longer rely on theory. You have to respond, adapt, and grow. You step into reality where growth is earned, not imagined. And that's where knowledge finally takes root and starts to bear fruit. So while it's important to keep learning, it's more important to keep moving. Knowledge should never be a destination. It should be a starting point. The purpose of learning is not to accumulate information. It's to transform it into something tangible through action. Because at the end of the day, what defines your growth isn't how much you know. It's what you've done with what you know. Waiting for the perfect conditions is one of the most subtle and dangerous traps we fall into. We tell ourselves that once things calm down, once we have more money, more time, or more confidence, then we'll finally take the leap. We convince ourselves that waiting is preparation, that patience will somehow deliver the right moment wrapped neatly with a bow. But perfect conditions don't exist. The right time never arrives. The world will always be messy, uncertain, and unpredictable. Waiting for everything to align perfectly is just another way to delay what you already know you should be doing. The truth is, waiting feels safer than acting. It gives us the illusion of control. We can plan, prepare, and polish our dreams in our minds without ever risking failure in reality. We become experts at overthinking, endlessly adjusting our plans until the spark of action fades away. But while we're waiting for certainty, life moves on. Opportunities don't pause while we build up the courage to chase them. They pass quietly, and by the time we realize it, the window has closed, and all we're left with is the weight of regret. The people who achieve remarkable things rarely begin under perfect circumstances. They start when it's inconvenient, when resources are scarce, and when they're unsure if it will work. They act because they understand that momentum creates opportunity. Once you take the first step, things begin to shift. The act of doing sets things in motion that waiting never could. Clarity doesn't precede action. It follows it. You don't need all the answers before you begin. You find them on the way. Perfection is the enemy of progress. It whispers that you need just a little more time, a little more practice, a little more reassurance before you start. But perfection isn't real. It's a moving target that will always stay out of reach. Those who chase perfection spend their lives preparing for a beginning that never comes. Progress, on the other hand, is imperfect by nature. It's built on trial, error, and adjustment. Every step forward, no matter how clumsy, brings you closer to where you want to be. The irony is that when you finally decide to act, you realize you were ready all along. Readiness isn't a condition, it's a choice. You become ready by doing, not by waiting. The moment you take that first uncertain step, you begin to grow into the person who can handle what comes next. You develop skills, resilience, and adaptability that no amount of planning could have given you. The strength you think you need before starting only appears after you begin. Fear often disguises itself as patience. We tell ourselves we're being strategic, thoughtful, or cautious, but in reality, we're afraid. We fear failing, being judged, or facing the unknown. But fear doesn't fade with time, it fades with action. Every day you wait, the fear grows stronger, convincing you that tomorrow will be easier. But tomorrow is just another version of today, and the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to begin. The only cure for fear is forward movement. There will always be reasons not to start. The timing will always feel off. The conditions never quite right. Life will continue to be unpredictable, and there will always be something standing in your way. But growth doesn't come from convenience. It comes from commitment. The most meaningful changes in life begin when you decide to act despite the chaos around you. It's in those imperfect beginnings that real progress is born, because you stop waiting for things to change and start becoming the one who changes them. When you stop waiting for the perfect moment, you realize that every moment holds potential. The job you hate, the resources you lack, the uncertainty you feel, all of it can become the starting point of something meaningful. The difference between those who move forward and those who stay stuck isn't circumstance, it's decision. One person says, someday, and the other says, today. And that single choice separates growth from stagnation. Taking imperfect action doesn't mean being reckless. It means being real. It means acknowledging that conditions will never be perfect, and that's okay. You learn as you go, adjusting along the way. You take a step, make a mistake, learn, and keep moving. Action invites opportunity. It opens doors that planning alone could never reveal. Every moment you spend in motion expands your perspective and builds your capacity to handle what's ahead. When you stop waiting for the right time and start moving, something powerful happens. You build momentum. Each small step creates energy, and that energy begins to carry you forward. You stop thinking in terms of what if, and start living in terms of what's next. Progress replaces hesitation, and before long, you realize that the right time was never something to wait for. It was something you were meant to create. There is a profound difference between being an echo and being an example. An echo repeats what it has heard. An example lives what it believes. The world is overflowing with voices that repeat advice, quotes, and philosophies, but very few that embody them. It's easy to say the right words, to post the right messages, to sound motivated and wise, but words lose their power when they are not backed by action. People remember examples because they see proof of belief in motion. They see conviction, not repetition. When you live as an example, you communicate through your behavior, not just your speech. You don't need to convince anyone of your values. They can see them in how you act, how you treat others, and how you respond to adversity. You become a living demonstration of what's possible. Your consistency becomes your credibility. The quiet strength of doing what you say you will do speaks louder than any slogan, lecture, or social media post ever could. Being an example requires integrity. It means aligning what you believe with what you practice, even when no one is watching. It means choosing what's right over what's easy. Echoes depend on approval. Examples depend on purpose. When you stop seeking validation and start seeking authenticity, you build a kind of influence that can't be faked. People trust actions far more than intentions, and they are inspired by those who live their truth, not just talk about it. The reason examples have power is because they offer something real. Advice can inspire thought, but examples inspire motion. Seeing someone live with courage and conviction gives others permission to do the same. It reminds people that it's possible to face fear and still move forward, to fail and still rise, to lead and still remain humble. Examples show the humanity behind success. They make the path visible and attainable by walking it themselves, not by describing it from afar. It's tempting to be an echo because it's safer. Echoes are accepted easily. They fit in. They don't risk criticism or rejection because they repeat what's already been approved. But examples take risks. They challenge norms, break patterns, and often face resistance for it. They don't blend in. They stand out. They don't say what people want to hear. They live in a way that makes others think, reflect, and sometimes question their own choices. And that's what makes them leaders, not followers. Living as an example doesn't mean being perfect. In fact, it's your imperfections that make your example powerful. When people see that you fail, struggle, and still keep going, they connect with your authenticity. They see that strength isn't about never falling, it's about rising every time you do. Your vulnerability becomes a form of leadership because it shows others that they don't need to be flawless to be worthy of progress. They just need to keep trying. Every time you act according to your values, even in small ways, you create ripples. Someone is always watching, even when you don't realize it. A colleague, a friend, a child, a stranger. Your consistency plants seeds of inspiration in people who may never tell you they were watching. The way you live can become the silent motivation someone else needs to begin. That's the quiet, lasting power of being an example. It influences not through instruction, but through inspiration. It's easy to talk about leadership, purpose, and authenticity, but it's much harder to live them. To be an example, you must make choices that cost you comfort. You must stand for something even when it's inconvenient. You must act with kindness when anger feels easier, and with patience when frustration tempts you. Being an example is not about being perfect. It's about being real enough to act in alignment with your truth over and over again, even when it's uncomfortable. Echoes fade with time, but examples endure. People may forget what you said, but they'll remember how you lived. They'll remember how you made them feel, how you handled pressure, and how you stood your ground when it mattered. The impact of an example doesn't disappear. When the moment ends, it continues through the lives it touches. That's the kind of influence that can't be manufactured. It must be earned through action. Every great movement, every meaningful change began with a person who chose to live differently. They didn't just talk about courage, they practiced it. They didn't just share ideas, they embodied them. They were willing to be seen trying, failing, and standing again. They didn't aim to impress, they aimed to express what they believed through action. And that's the essence of being an example, living in such a way that your life itself becomes a message worth hearing. There comes a point when words no longer matter, when what you do begins to speak louder than anything you could ever say. Your life, in all its quiet details and daily decisions, becomes a message in itself. The way you move through the world tells people what you value, what you believe, and what you stand for. Every action, every choice, every response to difficulty writes a story that others can read without a single word being spoken. Your life becomes your statement, your legacy, your answer to the questions others are still asking. When you start to live with purpose, you stop needing to justify yourself. You no longer waste energy explaining your intentions because your actions already reveal them. You begin to understand that consistency builds trust far faster than explanation ever could. When people see that you live what you believe, that your words and actions align even when it's inconvenient, they start to listen differently. They pay attention not because you demand it, but because you've earned it through integrity. You become someone whose presence communicates truth without needing to speak it. There is a kind of quiet power in living authentically. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists steady and sure. It's in the small moments, the way you show kindness when no one notices, the way you keep promises when it would be easier to break them, the way you remain humble in success and grounded in struggle. These are the things that make people look twice. They see something rare a life that matches its message. That kind of authenticity is magnetic because it's real, and realness is something people crave in a world full of noise. Your results, the tangible evidence of your choices, become your proof. You don't need to argue for what you believe in when your actions produce outcomes that speak for themselves. The success you create, the relationships you nurture, the peace you maintain, these become living evidence of your values. People may question your methods, but they cannot deny your results. Every achievement, every moment of growth, every example of resilience becomes part of a larger story that others can see and feel. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent enough that your progress tells the story for you. Living as your own example means realizing that your daily habits matter just as much as your biggest accomplishments. The way you show up each day, how you handle frustration, how you manage failure, how you celebrate others, shapes the reputation that precedes you. It's easy to perform well when the spotlight is on, but who you are in the quiet moments defines the truth of your character. People may forget the words you say in those moments, but they will never forget how you made them feel. That emotional imprint is what lingers. When you stop chasing approval and start chasing purpose, you begin to attract respect instead of attention. Respect is earned when your actions consistently reflect your values. It's built when people can rely on you to stand for something even when it's unpopular. The strongest voices are not the loudest ones. They are the ones whose silence carries weight because everyone already knows what they stand for. You become the kind of person who doesn't need to convince anyone of your worth. Your life already does that for you. There's a certain freedom that comes from letting your life do the talking. You no longer feel the need to compare yourself, defend yourself, or compete for validation. You move from proving to being. You realize that authenticity is your greatest strength because it cannot be duplicated. No one else can live your story, feel your experiences, or reflect your truth in the same way. And because of that, your life becomes its own kind of message, unique, undeniable, and deeply human. People are always watching, not in judgment, but in curiosity. They want to see if your actions align with your advice. They want to see if your beliefs hold up when tested. They want to know if it's possible to live with integrity in a world that rewards shortcuts. When they see you persist, when they see you walk your talk through both failure and success, they find something worth believing in. You become evidence that it's possible to live differently, and that evidence speaks louder than any motivational speech ever could. The more you live this way, the less you depend on external validation. You don't need applause to know your value or approval to feel secure. You become rooted in your own principles. You stop chasing temporary recognition because you understand that impact doesn't come from being seen. It comes from being consistent. And that consistency is what leaves a lasting mark. Over time, the people who once doubted you begin to notice that you never stopped showing up. And that quiet persistence becomes your greatest testimony. In the end, your life becomes the message others remember. The kindness you gave, the courage you showed, the integrity you lived with. These are the echoes that remain long after words fade. You don't need to tell people what kind of person you are. They already know from the way you live. And in that silent, undeniable proof, you discover the true meaning of influence. Not through speeches or promises, but through the unspoken power of example.